Man pulls off million-dollar scam on elderly woman, but when he discovers she's his grandmother, Michael Johnson adjusted his tie for the third time before ringing the doorbell. His hands trembled slightly, not from nerves, but excitement. Inside the black briefcase he carried were forged documents promising to transform another victim's life. At 30, he had perfected his persuasion techniques and knew exactly how to win over lonely elderly people. The door opened to reveal Dorothy Wilson, a 72-year-old woman with graying hair tied in a simple bun. She wore a beige cardigan over a cream blouse, and her brown eyes lit up when she saw him. "Good morning, Mrs. Wilson. How are you feeling today?" "Michael, my dear, come in. I was just making some coffee." The Upper East Side apartment was elegant yet understated, furnished with antiques that held decades of stories. Michael observed every detail, mentally calculating the worth of each piece. This woman's savings would be enough for his plans of a new life abroad. "I brought those documents I mentioned last week," he said, opening the briefcase with a practiced smile. "You won't believe the returns I secured for this investment." Dorothy poured coffee into porcelain cups that had once belonged to her mother. She had lived alone for 5 years since becoming a widow, and Michael's weekly visits had become the highlight of her days. He was polite, well-dressed, and always showed genuine concern for her well-being. "You know, Michael, sometimes I wonder if I'm being too bold at 72, she murmured, stirring sugar into her coffee. "Not at all, Mrs. Wilson. You worked your whole life as a teacher. You deserve to enjoy what you've earned, and this investment will ensure you never have to worry about money again." Michael spread the forged documents on the coffee table. Colorful charts displayed impossible returns, and fake stamps lent credibility to the papers. He had spent weeks crafting this perfect deception. "In just 3 months, your initial 5 million will grow to 8 million, he explained, pointing to the numbers. "And that's just the beginning. In a year, you'll have over 15 million. Dorothy's eyes widened. 5 million was her entire inheritance, the result of selling a family farm that had been in her lineage for generations. She had saved every penny, living solely on her teacher's pension. "But Michael, this money is all I have in the world." "That's exactly why it needs to grow, Mrs. Wilson. Inflation, medical costs, everything keeps rising. If you don't invest now, in a few years, this money won't be worth half as much." Michael leaned in and gently held her hands. It was a calculated move that always worked. His victim's emotional loneliness was his greatest tool. "Trust me, I would never let anything bad happen to you." Dorothy looked at the young man who had entered her life like a blessing. He was thoughtful, called to check on her, and brought flowers on special occasions. In her loneliest moments, she even fantasized about having a grandson like him. "All right, I'll make the transfer tomorrow morning." Michael could barely contain his excitement. Once again, his strategy had worked perfectly. He said goodbye with a warm hug and promised to return the following week with proof of the first profits. The next morning, Dorothy went to the bank with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. The manager, Sarah Thompson, who had known the retiree for years, was puzzled by the transaction. "Mrs. Wilson, are you sure about this transfer? It's a very large amount." "I am, Sarah. It's an investment that will change my life." "But the gentleman who accompanied you here yesterday to open the account?" "I don't know. He seemed a bit rushed to me." Dorothy shook her head firmly. Michael had explained that the urgency was due to market fluctuations. She signed all the documents and authorized the transfer of $5 million to an account that had been opened the day before. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. 3 days later, Michael was in a 5-star hotel in Miami, toasting alone with French champagne. The money had already been transferred overseas through a complex scheme he'd learned from other con artists. Dorothy would never be able to trace it. Meanwhile, in New York City, Dorothy tried to reach Michael. Her calls went straight to voicemail and her messages went unanswered. A growing worry took hold of her heart. On the 4th day, she decided to visit the address Michael had given her in person. The receptionist at the office building informed her that there had never been an investment firm on that floor. The address belonged to an accounting firm that knew nothing about Michael Johnson. Despair overwhelmed Dorothy. She rushed back to the bank where Sarah confirmed her worst fears. The account where the money had been transferred was empty, and the so-called Michael Johnson had used fake documents to open it. "We need to file a police report immediately," Sarah said, trying to comfort the trembling client. "My God, what have I done? How could I be so naive?" Dorothy broke down in tears. At the police station, Detective Richard Miller listened to her story with a grave expression. Cases like this were becoming more common, and it was usually very difficult to recover the money. "Do you remember any specific details about this man? Anything that could help us identify him?" Dorothy closed her eyes, trying to recall every meeting. Michael always wore dark suits, had a charming smile, spoke politely. Suddenly, an image flashed in her mind. He had a small scar on his neck, on the right side. It looked old, like from childhood. The detective noted the information, but privately doubted it would make a difference. Experienced con artists usually vanished without a trace. Dorothy returned home shattered. The apartment that had once been her refuge now felt like a prison. She sat in the armchair where Michael used to sit and cried until she had no tears left. Her neighbor, Martha Stewart, knocked on her door late that afternoon. The two had been friends for 15 years, ever since Dorothy moved into the building. "Dorothy, dear, are you all right? I didn't see you today and got worried." When Dorothy told her what had happened, Martha was furious. "That wretched man! How could anyone do this to someone with your kind heart?" "Martha, I've lost everything. All the money my father left me, the entire family inheritance. I don't know how I'll survive on just my pension." "Don't talk like that. We'll find a way to fix this." Martha hugged her friend and promised to help in any way she could. She had some savings set aside and wouldn't hesitate to share them with Dorothy if needed. Meanwhile, in Miami, Michael was enjoying his newfound fortune. He had rented a penthouse on Ocean Drive and spent his days between spas, expensive restaurants, and designer boutiques. He finally had the life he'd always dreamed of. But something strange began to happen. Every night before bed, Dorothy's face appeared in his mind, her expression when she'd said goodbye, holding his hands with such tenderness. The way she called him, "my dear," as if he were truly special to her. Michael tried to push these thoughts away. He had pulled off dozens of scams over the years and never cared about the victims. They were just numbers, means to an end. But Dorothy was different, though he couldn't understand why. Weeks passed, and the nightmares began. Michael dreamed of Dorothy crying, calling his name, asking why he had betrayed her. He woke up sweaty and distressed, unable to fall back asleep. To escape the nightmares, Michael started going out every night, frequenting bars and nightclubs. Alcohol helped him forget temporarily, but during the day, the anxiety returned in full force. In New York City, Dorothy was trying to rebuild her life. Martha had convinced her to seek out a social worker for government assistance. Her name was Rachel Cooper, a 50-year-old woman who had worked at the Department of Social Services for 2 decades. "Mrs. Wilson, I completely understand your situation. I'll do everything in my power to help you." Rachel began working on the case, reaching out to banks and financial institutions to try and trace the money. During one conversation, Dorothy mentioned the scar Michael had on his neck again. "A scar, you said? What exactly did it look like?" "Small on the right side of his neck. It looked old, maybe from when he was a child." Rachel felt a chill. That description stirred a distant memory in her mind. Years ago, when she was just starting in the profession, she had helped an abandoned child with an identical scar. "Mrs. Wilson, would you mind if I did some research into this man's past?" "Of course not. Anything that might help." Rachel returned to the office with a sense of urgency she hadn't felt in years. She went straight to the old files, searching through records from 25 years ago. The memory of that abandoned child wouldn't leave her mind. After hours of sifting through yellowed documents, she found what she was looking for. A 5-year-old boy had been brought to the assistance center in December 1998. The record noted a scar on the right side of his neck, the result of a household accident. The child had been left by a young woman who said she couldn't raise him. Rachel's heart raced when she read the mother's name, Jennifer Wilson Johnson. The surname Wilson was the same as Dorothy's. Could it just be a coincidence? She kept digging and discovered that Jennifer was Dorothy's daughter. The young woman had gotten pregnant at 17 in a relationship her family disapproved of. Pressured by her conservative parents, she hid the pregnancy and had the baby in secret. Rachel needed to be sure before revealing anything to Dorothy. She searched hospital records and found the birth certificate. The baby's name was Michael Johnson Wilson, born on July 15, 1993. The date perfectly matched the scammer's age. The social worker felt a knot in her stomach. If her suspicions were correct, Michael had unknowingly scammed his own grandmother. She decided to investigate further before telling Dorothy anything. Rachel had contacts in security and managed to get a photo of Michael from bank surveillance footage. When she showed the image to Dorothy, the reaction was immediate. "That's him. That's the Michael who deceived me." Rachel compared the photo to an old image from the abandoned child's file. Even with 25 years between them, the similarities were undeniable. The shape of his face, his nose, the curve of his lips, everything pointed to them being the same person. But one crucial piece of the puzzle was still missing. Rachel needed to know about Jennifer, Dorothy's daughter. If she were alive, she could confirm Michael's identity. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us tremendously as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Dorothy fell silent for long minutes when Rachel asked about Jennifer. Finally, with tears in her eyes, she began to share a story she'd kept buried for decades. Jennifer was my only daughter. She got pregnant at 17 by a boy she met at school. My husband was furious, said she dishonored the family. Back then, having a child out of wedlock was a terrible shame. Dorothy paused, wiping away the tears that had started to fall. I wanted her to keep the baby, but my husband wouldn't allow it. He sent her to his sister's house in the countryside during the pregnancy. When the boy was born, Jennifer was forced to give him up for adoption. And after that, what happened to her? Jennifer never forgave me. She said I'd chosen my husband over my grandson. At 18, she ran away. I searched for her for years, but she'd vanished completely. Rachel felt the weight of the revelation. The pieces were falling together in a tragic and ironic way. Mrs. Wilson, I need to ask you something very important. Have you ever tried to find your grandson? Every single day of my life, Dorothy sighed deeply. When my husband passed 5 years ago, I started looking for Jennifer and my grandson. I even hired a private detective, but we found nothing. It's as if they disappeared off the face of the earth. Rachel made a difficult decision. She had to share her suspicions with Dorothy, even at the risk of being wrong. Mrs. Wilson, I need to tell you something. Based on my research, there's a possibility that Michael might be your grandson. The silence that followed was deafening. Dorothy stood frozen, trying to process what she'd just heard. What do you mean? That's impossible. I found records of a child abandoned 25 years ago. The age, the scar, even the last name Wilson. It all matches. Dorothy rose from her chair and began pacing, struggling to organize her thoughts. You're telling me the man who stole all my money could be my own grandson? It's a possibility we can't ignore. Dorothy stopped pacing and looked directly at Rachel. Even if it's true, it changes nothing. He still stole my inheritance. He still lied and betrayed me. I understand your anger, Mrs. Wilson, but maybe we can use this information to find him. Rachel explained that if Michael really was Dorothy's grandson, there was a chance he might return to New York City at some point. People who grew up without family often felt an unconscious need to search for their roots. Meanwhile, in Miami, Michael was going through an existential crisis. His nightmares had intensified, and he'd begun having panic attacks during the day. The image of Dorothy haunted him constantly. Desperate to understand what was happening, Michael decided to see a psychologist. Dr. Benjamin Clark specialized in anxiety disorders and welcomed Michael into his downtown office. Michael, tell me what you're feeling. Doctor, I did something terrible. I stole money from an elderly woman and now I can't stop thinking about her. Why is this particular person affecting you so deeply? Michael ran a hand through his hair, clearly distressed. I don't know how to explain it. I've stolen from others before and never cared, but this woman was different. She treated me like family. The psychologist noted Michael's words, sensing something significant. When you say, like family, what exactly do you mean? She used to call me my dear, always asking if I was eating well, if I needed anything. It was like she truly cared about me. Michael, tell me about your family. Do you have parents, grandparents? Michael's expression changed completely. He lowered his eyes and his voice became almost a whisper. I was abandoned as a child. I grew up in orphanages and foster homes. I never knew who my parents were, or if I had any other relatives. Dr. Benjamin began to understand the situation. Michael had found in Dorothy a maternal figure he had never had, and this unconscious connection was fueling his current guilt. Michael, have you ever tried looking for your biological family? I tried a few times when I was younger, but I never found anything. The records were incomplete or non-existent. And how do you feel about that? Michael took a long time to answer. It was the first time anyone had asked about his feelings regarding the abandonment. Angry. So angry. Why did they abandon me? Why didn't anyone want me? Could that anger have influenced your life choices? Maybe. I always thought if the world didn't care about me, I didn't need to care about the world either. The therapy sessions were opening old wounds Michael had tried to forget. He remembered the pain of being rejected by adoptive families, the loneliness in the orphanages, the constant feeling of not belonging anywhere. Meanwhile, in New York City, Rachel continued her investigation. She gained access to the records of the orphanage where Michael had grown up and uncovered important details about his childhood. The boy had been adopted 3 times, but always ended up back at the orphanage. Reports noted behavioral issues and difficulty forming emotional bonds. As a teenager, he ran away from the system and disappeared. Rachel also discovered that Michael had used several aliases over the years. Besides Michael Johnson, he had gone by Robert Thompson, Ryan Brown, and Raymond Davis. He always kept the initials MJ, perhaps unconsciously preserving his real identity. The social worker decided it was time to tell Dorothy the whole truth. They met at a cafe near the older woman's apartment. Mrs. Wilson, I need to show you something. Rachel opened a folder with documents and photos. First, she showed the birth certificate of Michael Johnson Wilson, son of Jennifer Wilson Johnson. This is your grandson's birth certificate. His name is Michael Johnson Wilson. Dorothy took the document with trembling hands. There was her daughter's name, confirming she had indeed had a son. And this is a photo of him as a child, at 5 years old, when he was left at the care center. The photo showed a small boy with sad eyes and the same scar on his neck. Dorothy immediately recognized the family resemblance. My God, it's him. It's my grandson. Tears streamed down Dorothy's face. She had spent 25 years searching for that boy, and he had been by her side for months without either of them knowing. Rachel, does this mean my own grandson stole my money? Unfortunately, yes. But Mrs. Wilson, he didn't know you were his grandmother. To him, you were just another victim. Dorothy closed her eyes, trying to process everything. Her heart was torn between the joy of finally knowing about her grandson and the pain of being betrayed by him. What do I do now, Rachel? How do I confront him with this? First, we need to find him. I have some contacts who can help track him down. Rachel had built a network over the years that included private investigators, social workers from other states, and even former police officers. She started reaching out to all of them to locate Michael. 2 days later, she received an important call. Michael had been spotted in Miami, using a credit card under his real name at a high-end clothing store. Mrs. Dorothy, we've found him. He's in Miami. I want to go there. Are you sure? It could be dangerous. He might run again if he realizes we've tracked him down. Dorothy thought for a few moments. At 72 years old, she had missed many opportunities in life. She wasn't going to let this one slip away. Rachel, I've spent my whole life searching for my grandson. Now that I know where he is, I won't give up." Rachel admired the elderly woman's determination. She decided to accompany Dorothy to Miami with the help of a fellow social worker there. The next day, the two boarded the first flight to Florida. During the trip, Dorothy couldn't stop thinking about the reunion. What would she say to the grandson she had abandoned, who, years later, had robbed her without knowing who she was? In Miami, Michael was leaving another therapy session when he received a strange call. A male voice said only, "Michael, we know who you really are. We know about your past at St. Mary's Orphanage." The call ended before Michael could respond. His blood ran cold. That orphanage was where he had spent most of his childhood. How could anyone know about that? He tried calling back, but the number was blocked. A growing paranoia took hold of him. Maybe the investigation into the scam against Dorothy was getting close. He decided he needed to leave Miami immediately. Michael went to his apartment and started packing when the phone rang again. Michael Johnson Wilson, born July 15, 1993, son of Jennifer Wilson Johnson. This time the voice was female. Michael nearly dropped the phone. "Who are you? How do you know this?" "You'll find out soon. We'll be waiting for you at the Shoreline Cafe on Ocean Drive tomorrow at 3 in the afternoon. I'm not going anywhere. If you don't, we'll make all the details of your scams public, including what you did to Mrs. Dorothy Wilson." The call ended again. Michael was in complete panic. Not only did they know about the scam, but they also knew intimate details about his birth, and the last name Wilson, why did it sound familiar? He spent the night sleepless, trying to figure out how someone had uncovered so much about him. Michael had been very careful to erase his tracks over the years. The next morning, Dorothy and Rachel arrived in Miami. The local social worker, Jessica Taylor, was waiting for them at the airport. "We've located the apartment where he's staying, but it's better to meet him in a public place." Rachel had arranged the meeting at the Shoreline Cafe. It was a busy spot where Michael wouldn't be able to escape easily, but also wouldn't feel completely cornered. "Mrs. Dorothy, are you sure you want to do this? We can still call the police and let them handle it." "No, Rachel. This is my grandson. I need to talk to him myself." At 2:30 in the afternoon, the three women sat at a strategic table in the cafe with a clear view of the entrance. Dorothy was visibly nervous, fidgeting with her purse strap. Exactly at 3, Michael walked into the cafe. He looked around suspiciously, clearly tense. When his eyes met Dorothy's, he froze as if struck. "Mrs. Dorothy, what are you doing here?" Michael approached the table, confused and frightened. He couldn't understand how the woman he had robbed was there, in another state. "Sit down, Michael, or should I say it, Michael Johnson Wilson?" The full name made Michael tremble. He sat down slowly, never taking his eyes off Dorothy. "How do you know my real name?" "Because I'm your grandmother, Michael." The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity. Michael blinked several times, as if he couldn't process what he'd just heard. "That's impossible. My family abandoned me. They wanted nothing to do with me." Dorothy felt her heart break at the pain in her grandson's eyes. "Michael, I've spent the last 25 years looking for you. I never stopped trying to find you. Lies. If you wanted to find me, you would have." Michael's voice grew louder, drawing curious glances from other tables. Rachel stepped in. "Michael, I'm Rachel Cooper, a social worker. I have all the documents here proving that Mrs. Wilson is your grandmother." She opened the folder and showed his birth certificate, childhood photos and records from St. Mary's Orphanage. Michael took the papers with trembling hands. When he saw the photo of himself at 5 years old, a tear rolled down his face. It was the only picture he had from that time, and he'd never known how it ended up in that file. "Why? Why did you abandon me?" Dorothy could no longer hold back her tears. "Michael, your mother Jennifer was my daughter. She got pregnant very young, and my husband forced her to give you up for adoption. I tried to stop it, but back then, women had no say. And where's my mother now?" "I don't know, my boy. She ran away after you were born, and I never saw her again." Michael was in complete shock. The woman he had robbed was his own grandmother. The person who had shown him genuine kindness was his family. "Mrs. Grandma, I stole your money." "I know, Michael. I know everything. Why didn't you tell me who you were when you found out?" "Because I wanted you to know on your own. I wanted you to understand the truth about our family." Michael began to cry as he hadn't since childhood. All the anger, all the pain of abandonment, all the guilt for what he'd done mixed into a storm of emotions. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know you were my family." Dorothy stood and hugged her grandson for the first time in 25 years. Michael let himself be held, feeling something he'd never experienced before, the unconditional love of family. "I'll pay back all the money," he whispered between sobs. "I'll work for the rest of my life if I have to, but I'll pay it all back. The money doesn't matter, Michael. What matters is that I've finally found you." Rachel and Jessica watched the scene with tears in their eyes. It was rare to witness such an intense and meaningful moment. After Michael calmed down, they talked for hours at the Shoreline Cafe. Dorothy told him about Jennifer's life before the pregnancy, how she had been a happy, dreamy girl. Michael spoke about his childhood in the orphanage, the failed adoption attempts, the loneliness that led him to a life of crime. "Michael, I want you to come with me to New York City," Dorothy said. "I want you to live with me, to take care of you the way I should have 25 years ago. Grandma, I don't deserve this. I've done terrible things. I've stolen from people, lied, cheated. We all deserve a second chance, my grandson, and you're my family." Michael looked at the woman who had been his victim and now revealed herself as his salvation. For the first time in his life, he felt he truly belonged somewhere. "What if I can't change? What if I disappoint you again?" "Then we'll try again. As many times as it takes." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot, as we're just starting out. Now continuing. In the following days, Michael and Dorothy stayed in Miami while arranging his transfer to New York City. Rachel helped them with the necessary legal and psychological procedures. Michael revealed that he had kept most of the money in offshore accounts. He had never spent it all because deep down he knew it wasn't truly his. "Grandma, I can return $4.5 million. I only spent $500,000. "Michael, you don't need to worry about that right now." "No, I do. It's the only way I can start forgiving myself for what I did." Michael contacted his former accomplices and managed to reverse most of the transfers. The process was complicated and dangerous, but he was determined to do the right thing. Meanwhile, Dorothy called Martha in New York City to share the news. "Martha, you won't believe this. I found my grandson." "What do you mean, dear? How did you find him?" "The Michael who robbed me. He's my grandson." Martha fell silent for several seconds. "Dorothy, are you sure? That seems impossible." "I have all the documents right here. It's him, Martha. It's my little grandson." "And now? What are you going to do?" "He's going to live with me. We'll be a real family." Martha was worried about her friend. Was it safe to welcome someone into her home who had just pulled off $1 million scam? "Dorothy, don't you think it's risky? He might try to rob you again." "Martha, he's my grandson, my own flesh and blood. I can't abandon him again." On their last night in Miami, Michael and Dorothy had dinner together at a restaurant on Ocean Drive. It was the first meal they shared, knowing the truth about their relationship. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Of course, my boy." "Did you always know you had a grandson?" Dorothy took a deep breath before answering. "I always knew, Michael. Every single day of my life I thought about you. I wondered how you were, if you were okay, if you had a family who loved you." "Then why didn't you ever look for me before?" "I did. I hired detectives, went to orphanages, searched public records. But you disappeared from the system when you turned 18. Michael remembered how hard he had worked to erase his tracks after leaving the last orphanage. Ironically, his attempt to hide from the world had also hidden him from his family. "Grandma, I need to tell you something. When I first started visiting you, I felt something strange. It was like I already knew you from somewhere. What do you mean? It was a sense of familiarity I'd never felt with any other victim. That's why the nightmares started after I robbed you. Dorothy held her grandson's hand across the table. Maybe the heart recognizes what the mind can't understand. The next day, they flew together to New York City. Rachel accompanied them to help with the transition and ensure Michael had the psychological support he needed. When they arrived at Dorothy's apartment, Michael was overwhelmed. He recognized every corner, every piece of furniture, but now he saw it all with new eyes. It was no longer the home of a victim. It was his grandmother's house. Michael, I set up the guest room for you, but if you'd prefer, I can arrange something else. No, Grandma, I want to stay here. I finally want to have a real home. Martha came to visit them on the first day. She was clearly nervous about meeting Michael, but Dorothy insisted on introducing them. Martha, this is my grandson Michael. Michael, this is Mrs. Martha, my best friend. Michael extended his hand to greet Martha, but she hesitated before shaking it. Nice to meet you, Michael. I hope you take good care of my friend. I promise I will, Mrs. Martha. I know I have a lot to prove. In the first few days, living together was difficult. Michael wasn't used to family life, and Dorothy constantly had to remind herself that he wasn't the little boy she'd been forced to give up anymore. Michael insisted on sleeping on the living room couch for the first few nights, saying he didn't deserve his own room. Dorothy had to convince him that this was his home as much as hers. Michael, you're my grandson. This apartment is your home now. Grandma, I still feel like an intruder, like someone who shouldn't be here. These feelings will pass with time, my dear. You need to learn to forgive yourself. Rachel recommended a psychologist in New York City so Michael could continue his treatment. Dr. William Harris specialized in abandonment trauma and financial crimes. In the first few sessions, Michael struggled to accept that he deserved a second chance. Doctor, how can I live in peace knowing I stole from my own grandmother? Michael, the fact that you feel guilty shows you have a moral conscience. That's a good sign. But I did it for months. I manipulated her, lied to her, used her feelings against her. And now you have the chance to do things differently, to show who you really are when you're not just fighting to survive. The psychologist helped Michael understand that his life of crime had been a response to abandonment and a lack of emotional connections. Now that he had found a family, he needed to learn new ways to relate to others. Dorothy also started therapy to deal with the complex emotions of the situation. It was hard to balance her grandmotherly love with the pain of having been scammed. Doctor, sometimes I look at him and see my little grandson. Other times, I remember the man who stole from me. How do I reconcile these feelings? Mrs. Wilson, it's natural to have mixed emotions. The Michael who stole from you and the Michael who is your grandson are the same person at different points in his life, but how can I ever fully trust him again? Trust is rebuilt little by little through consistent actions over time. Michael began looking for a job so he could repay the money that was still missing. His sales experience, even if gained illegally, helped him land a position at an electronics store in Soho. Grandma, I got a job. It doesn't pay much, but it's an honest start. I'm proud of you, Michael. I'm going to save every paycheck to pay back what I still owe you. Michael, you don't have to deprive yourself of everything. Take what you need for your own expenses. No, Grandma, I need to do this. It's the only way I'll ever feel at peace with myself. Michael worked 12-hour days, taking overtime whenever possible. He wanted to repay the $500,000 as quickly as he could. Dorothy worried seeing her grandson push himself so hard. She tried to convince him the money wasn't important, but Michael wouldn't budge. Grandma, you don't understand. I need to prove to myself that I can be a good person. You already are a good person, Michael. You were just lost. After 3 months of living together, Michael had saved $50,000. He gave all the money to Dorothy, but she refused it. Michael, I won't take this money. What do you mean? It's rightfully yours. I want you to use this money to go to school. I want you to get a degree. Michael was stunned by the offer. He had never even considered going to college. Grandma, I'm not cut out for school. I barely finished high school. You're smart, Michael. You used that intelligence the wrong way before, but now you can use it to build something good. Dorothy had researched degree programs and found a private college that offered scholarships for low-income students. There's a business administration program that would be perfect for you. With your sales experience, you'd do really well. Michael resisted at first, but Dorothy was persistent. She went with him to the college and helped him enroll. "Grandma, what if I can't keep up with the classes?" "Then I'll help you study. Don't forget I was a teacher for 40 years. The first day of class was terrifying for Michael. At 30 years old, he was older than most of his classmates and felt out of place. But little by little, he adapted. His life experience helped him understand concepts that were difficult for his younger peers. Dorothy always waited for him with dinner ready when he returned from college. They talked about classes, professors, and assignments. "How was your day today, my son?" "Tough, Grandma. I had a financial math test." "And how did you do?" "I think well. I managed to understand the concepts because I'd seen similar situations at work." Michael began to stand out in class. His professors noticed his dedication and maturity, and he quickly became one of the top students. At the same time, he kept working to save the rest of the money. Dorothy tried to convince him he'd already been forgiven, but Michael insisted on paying back every last cent. A year after moving in together, Michael finally managed to return the full $500,000. He organized a symbolic ceremony to hand over the money. "Grandma, this is the final payment. Now we're even." Dorothy accepted the money with tears in her eyes. "Michael, you have no idea how proud I am of you. Now I can say I'm truly your grandson. Before I was just a stranger who robbed you. You've always been my grandson, Michael, since the day you were born." That night, they had a small celebration with Martha and Rachel, who had become part of their extended family. "Rachel, I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done for us," Dorothy said. "Mrs. Wilson, this is the kind of happy ending we dream of in our work." Martha, who had initially doubted Michael, now treated him like a nephew. "Michael, you've proven people can truly change." "Mrs. Stewart, it was my grandmother's love that transformed me. Without her, I'd still be lost today." Michael graduated with a degree in business administration 2 years later. Dorothy made sure to attend the graduation ceremony. "Grandma, thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." "Michael, seeing you graduate is the greatest joy of my life." After graduation, Michael landed a better job at a financial consulting firm. Ironically, his past experience helped him identify potential fraud. "Grandma, my boss promoted me. I'm now the supervisor of the fraud prevention department." What a wonderful irony, isn't it? It's like all that bad experience is serving something good now. Michael used his knowledge of scams to help others avoid falling into traps. He developed workshops for seniors on how to protect themselves from fraudsters. "My experience taught me exactly how these criminals think," he explained in his talks. "I can help you recognize the warning signs." Dorothy always attended his workshops, proud to see her grandson using his past to help others. 3 years after their reunion, Michael met Jessica, a co-worker who became his girlfriend. When he told her his story, she was amazed by his transformation. "Michael, you had the courage to completely change your life. That's admirable." "Jessica, I only managed because of my grandmother's support. She never gave up on me." Michael introduced Jessica to Dorothy, who immediately embraced her as a granddaughter. "Jessica, dear, I'm so glad my grandson found someone special." "Mrs. Wilson, Michael talks about you every day. It's beautiful to see the love you share." A year later, Michael proposed to Jessica. He did it in the living room of Dorothy's apartment, the same place where they had reunited after discovering the truth. "Grandma, I wanted you to be the first to know. Jessica agreed to marry me." "Michael, what joy. Finally, our family will grow." The wedding was simple but full of meaning. Dorothy walked Michael down the aisle, representing both the father and mother he never had. "Michael, you know I love you as if you were my own son," she whispered as they walked. "Grandma, you're everything I ever wanted in a family." After the wedding, Michael and Jessica bought an apartment in the same building as Dorothy. They wanted to be close to her but also have their independence. "Grandma, this way you can visit us whenever you want. And you can visit me too. I'll practically have both of you living with me." Dorothy finally felt complete. At 75, she had regained her family and gained a granddaughter she loved as if she were her own. Michael continued thriving in his career. He became the company's director and began writing a book on financial fraud prevention. "Grandma, I want to dedicate the book to you." "Michael, you don't have to do that." "Yes, I do. You saved me from a life of crime and gave me a second chance. I want the world to know that." Michael's book became a success, and he began giving lectures across the country. His story of transformation inspired others who had committed crimes and wanted to change their lives. At one of these lectures, a woman in the audience stood up to ask a question. "Michael, have you ever tried to find your birth mother?" The question caught Michael off guard. He looked at Dorothy, who was in the front row. "Yes, I have. But my mother disappeared many years ago." "What if she were here in the audience?" Michael's heart raced. He scanned the crowd again and saw a woman in her 50s slowly rising. "Michael, Michael, my son." It was Jennifer. His mother had been watching the lecture without his knowledge. The auditorium fell completely silent. Michael stepped off the stage and walked toward the woman, who was weeping uncontrollably. "Mom? Michael, my dear son, I've spent my whole life looking for you." They embraced in the middle of the auditorium, surrounded by the audience's emotional applause. Dorothy also stood and walked toward the daughter she hadn't seen in 25 years. "Jennifer, my daughter." "Mom, I'm so sorry. Sorry for everything." The three generations of the family held each other, finally reunited after decades apart. Jennifer explained she had spent years searching for Michael and Dorothy. She had changed her name and moved to Chicago, where she worked as a nurse. When she saw news of Michael's lectures online, she recognized her son immediately. "Michael, I never wanted to give you up. Your grandfather forced me." "Mom, I understand. Grandma already explained everything." "Dorothy, can you forgive me? I was unfair to you." "Jennifer, you were just a child. I should have protected you better." The family reunion was the most emotional moment of their lives. Michael finally had his mother, his grandmother, his wife, and a few months later they discovered Jessica was pregnant. "Grandma, we're having a baby." "Michael, what joy! I'll be a great-grandmother." "And I'll be a grandmother," Jennifer added, laughing and crying at the same time. The baby, a girl named Dorothy after her great-grandmother, was born 9 months later. Michael held his daughter for the first time with tears of gratitude. "Little one, you'll grow up surrounded by love. You'll have a family that will never abandon you." Dorothy, now 78, cradled her great-granddaughter with a heart overflowing with happiness. "Michael, you see, love always finds a way." "Grandma, thank you for never giving up on me, for showing me that everyone deserves a second chance." "Michael, you turned the worst moment of my life into the best. Losing those $5 million was the best investment I ever made because it brought you back to me." Michael looked around and saw his family whole for the first time in his life. Jennifer was helping Jessica with the baby. Dorothy was humming a lullaby, and Martha was arranging the gifts in the corner of the room. He thought about how his life had completely changed. From a lonely, bitter con artist, he had become an honest man, a loving husband, a grateful son, and now a devoted father. "Grandma, sometimes I think everything happened exactly as it was supposed to." "How so?" "If I hadn't pulled that scam on you, maybe we never would have found each other. My worst deed brought me my greatest blessing." Dorothy smiled, stroking her great-granddaughter's head. "Michael, destiny has mysterious ways of bringing loved ones together." That night, while everyone slept, Michael stayed awake, watching his daughter in the crib. He silently promised that she would grow up knowing she was loved, that she had a family, and that she would always have a home to return to. The story that began with betrayal and abandonment had transformed into a tale of redemption, forgiveness, and unconditional love. Michael learned that it's never too late to change. Dorothy discovered that family love is stronger than any resentment. And Jennifer understood that forgiveness can heal even the deepest wounds. And so 5 years after the scam that could have destroyed their lives, The Wilson family was finally whole, united, and at peace. The end. And you, dear listener, what did you think of this story of redemption? Do you believe Michael made the right choices to rebuild his life? Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other heartwarming tales that touch the soul.